Before we start, a kind reminder. Whether it's piano, solo, choir, or group hymn, the service is a time for reflection, connection, and even meditation. Always, let's remember not to chat or whisper during any of the music.
I'm going to play a fairy tale by Nicholas Medtner. He's a Russian composer who wrote many of these, and you don't know what the fairy tales were about. He didn't give a story or a program, but there's a kind of narrative feel, like once upon a time, and then something happens, and then and it's not usually they lived happily ever after because he's Russian, but anyway, it's a very affecting music, and I really have come to love this composer as somebody I discovered during the pandemic.
Welcome to Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Stacy Sasaki. I am wearing a gray skirt, a brown sweater, I have red hair, I have glasses, I'm about 66 years old, and I have brown boots on. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't taken the time to do that yet, because this is your chance to unplug, relax, and enjoy some fellowship. We're going to try to do everything as quickly as we can today. We have some luscious stories for you to hear. So, thank you for joining us this morning in person and on Zoom. Our announcements are two. Mary has an announcement.
Good morning. I have a special activity for us to do today. So who doesn't like to receive mail, like snail mail, addressed snail mail? We all love that, right? Well, it's the time of year when we start doing what we call cards of care. These are cards that are sent out to the whole Summit community sometime early February. So we all get a little heart in the mail. And this one says, love and joy, with a mirror heart on the front. It says, may you reflect and find a bit of joy. With love from your friends at Summit. So we're going to be making these in RE and in the salon. So if you feel creative, you can do the decorating. If you're one person who likes to write, you can write the note inside. I have other samples here. There's no right or wrong. It's just sending out some joy and love. So I hope you'll help in the salon after the service.
Ron from Social Justice in Action.
I'm Ron Getz. I'm wearing black because I like Johnny Cash. This is an announcement for the Social Justice and Action Committee. We have a box in the entry room. Is that what it's called? Greeting room in the lobby. I want to show you some examples of what you can bring. These are beans. No, there's too many. This is a second jar of a can of beans. This is a childhood favorite of mine, sardines. You know how much these are now? It's awesome. This was $1. But I don't know if those students are sardine eaters. She's telling me to be brief. This is a no water shower cap. You don't have to be in a shower. You can do this on the run. I use these. It saves so much because I only need to shower like once a week. Oh, did I say that? Oh, no. I knew I was going to say that. So that was not.
Thank you, Ron. We acknowledge that our fellowship resides on unceded Kumeyaay land. The Kumeyaay have lived on this land for 10,000 years, and it is their home today. We recognize the abusive history of colonization in California and are mindful of our duty to responsibly act from our position of privilege. Now we'll do the chalice lighting, and that will be Serafina.
Thanks, Serafina. You can light any time during this, but I'm going to tell a story as our chalice lighting. I am Aunt Leanne. I am dressed in bright colors as usual. Aunt Leanne is my professional storytelling name, and no matter who I'm telling stories to, that's the name that I use. But I will answer to Leanne if necessary. It's nice to be back here at Summit. I know that on my previous visits, we've talked about my approach to traditional stories being the same as the way I was taught to look at sacred texts, because I believe that stories are sacred texts. But today I'm not going to analyze or unpack or take that time with our stories. And so I would like you all to listen to the stories with your open minds and open hearts, looking for the answers to the questions that everybody has, right? Those mysterious questions such as, who am I in this story? Who do I see from my life? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? And the most important question of all for me, do you want to hear a story? There was a farmer who had 3 children, and he was trying to decide who would get the farm and the animals and the running of the farm when he was gone. And so he gathered his 3 children together and gave them each a coin that was worth about $1 and said, buy what you can to fill the house, and whoever fills it most completely will be my heir. Well, the oldest child took the coin and walked for about an hour to the nearest neighbor, and that neighbor was baling hay. And the oldest child said, how much hay can I get for this? And took home a whole cartful. Brought it home, shook it throughout the house. I wouldn't have wanted to be on cleanup for that, but that's another story. It filled it to about a foot all over the house. And the farmer said, well done. And they waited for the middle child, who walked in the opposite direction for about 2 hours to another neighbor who was gathering together feathers. Feathers, this is perfect. The middle child bought as many feathers as they could with that coin and brought home 2 wagon loads. Feathers were cheap. When they brought home the feathers, they scattered everywhere throughout the whole house. And by the time they had settled, it was almost 2 feet of feathers everywhere. Well done, said the farmer. Let's wait for your youngest sibling. Well, the youngest sibling walked and walked and walked all day long until they got to town. And they took their coin and went into a store. And when they came out at sundown, they just had one tiny little bag clasped in their hand. And they walked all the way home in the dark. And when they got there, they pulled out little tiny candles and set them carefully throughout the house and lit them all. And there in the darkness, the light filled the house. I hope that our light will fill the darkness as well.
Please stand as you're willing and able to do the UU hymn, followed by the UU aspiration. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. We now have a hymn, so you might want to stay standing. Hymn number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our face in each of our eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silent, sacred space and the God of our heart then, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Joys and concerns can be emailed or texted to Reverend KC throughout the week, or can be handwritten up near the chancel on a Sunday morning. They can also be emailed to me. And my name is Stacy Sasaki again. All are welcome to light a candle as so moved. We have one joy today, and it's from Mary Carter Vale, and it says, "Rain." I agree with that. Okay, so it's time for all ages, the Octopus Fairy.
Coming up. She'd like company. Come on up. Have you ever heard of an octopus fairy? No, I hadn't heard of one until I got this story either. But because you all look like very, very bright kids, I bet you've heard of an octopus, right? What's the most important thing about an octopus, do you think? What? 8 legs. That's what almost everybody would say, wouldn't you think? Where do they live? In the sea, silly Aunt Leanne. She asks these odd questions, don't I? Yeah. Yep. Octopuses have, or octopi, depending on what generation you are. Octopuses have 8 legs, and they live under the sea. And that's really all I knew about them until I read this story from the imagination of Gitanjali Joshi. Osmond was an octopus who lived under the sea and had great dreams, great big dreams. Every night, Osmond would dream that he was a fairy, that he lived way up high out of the ocean on land and would fly with silvery wings in and out of the trees, that he was friends with butterflies, friends with birds, and he loved his dreams. In fact, he loved his dreams so much that while he was sleeping, sometimes all 8 of his legs would get going and knock things over and wake up everyone in his house. And his family was very understanding, unless something landed on him, landed on his brothers or sisters or mother or father. And Osmond felt bad about that, but he still loved his dream. One day, he was telling a special friend, "I wish that I could really be a fairy. And then I wouldn't have to dream at night and knock things over. But there's no way." And his friend said, "Well, you could always go to the old water fish." The old water fish, that sounds scary.
The old waterfish can grant you one wish, but only if he wants to. And he lives far away in a deep, dark cave. Oh, Osmond wasn't sure about that at all, but he thought and he thought, and he really wanted to be a fairy. So he told his family, I'm going to go find the old waterfish and see if he can turn me into a fairy. And he waited to hear what his family would say. And they said, oh, if you're a fairy, you won't be able to be with us anymore. He said, if I get to be a fairy, I'll come back and visit every week, I promise. All right, then. We want you to be happy. And so Osmond started out far, far, far into the deep until he came to the big, huge cave where old waterfish lived. And he crept up to the door and he said, hello, is anyone in there? And then he ducked with all 8 of his arms over his ears, waiting for the huge, booming voice he was sure was going to come back. And someone said, yes, I'm here. Who are you? And out swam a teeny little old scraggly fish with just one eye and a broken fin and swam right up to Osmond and said, I'm the old waterfish. Weren't you looking for me? Well, you're not exactly what I was expecting, but yes, I have a wish. Can you grant a wish? It depends. What is it? I want to be a fairy. Oh, brother. Why do you want to be a fairy? Well, I feel like a fairy. Inside, I've always felt like I should be a fairy with silvery wings, flying with the butterflies and soaring with the birds. Oh, well, once you go up there into the air breathers, you won't be able to come back down here. I know. So you're just willing to abandon everyone? No. I would always come back and visit, but it's who I am inside. I know it. All right. That's a pretty good wish then. And with that, the little old scraggly waterfish waved his broken fin, and a bubble surrounded Osmond, all 8 of his arms inside. And he started to float up and up and up toward the surface. And as he was floating, he could feel silvery wings coming out of his back. And by the time he popped up into the surface, he started to fly high into the air. And he met the butterflies and fluttered with them. And he met the birds and soared with them. And he knew that he had always meant to be an octopus fairy. And when he came back and visited at the shore with his family every week, they could see how happy he was. And they were glad that he became an octopus fairy. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Our children's recessional. One, each person is worthwhile, 2, be kind in all you do. 3, we help each other learn. 4, and search for what is true. 5, all people have a say. 6, work for a peaceful world. 7, the web of life's the wave that will bring us back to me and you. Don't make me fuss so naughty, go so. Now the choir will be led by Duncan, singing Let Us Be. Magic happens when the wand of language strikes a stone and makes it melt, touches a spindle and turns it into gold, or taps a trunk and makes it fly. By drawing on a syntax of enchantment that conjures fluidity, ethereality, flimsiness, and transparency, we turn solidity into resplendent, airy lightness to produce miracles of linguistic transubstantiation. Aunt Leanne has a biography. I encourage you to read it in there. I'm not going to for the sake of time, but she is a master storyteller, and we welcome her now for her stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was especially kind since I set her that that task to read. Yes. Do you want to hear a story? I live with my son and his family. They moved into our house 2 years ago, which means that I live with a fairly new reader who's 7. And he's very self-motivated. He loves, well, currently he's obsessed with the Dog Man books. Yeah, they wouldn't be my first choice of literature, but he loves them. And he wants to share them with me. And so, of course, I'm a good granny, and I do that. But one day I realized that he had memorized a section that is a graphic novel inside one of these books. Stay with me here. And it's based on the short poem that Dale Carnegie used to say, which is 2 prisoners stood behind bars. One saw the mud and one saw the stars. And this graphic novel is about 2 birds who are hatched at the same time, and one only sees how awful everything is, and the other one is unrelentingly positive about everything. And he had this whole thing memorized. And I said, Eli, why is this important to you? I haven't heard you memorize anything before. He said, well, it seems like it's a really good, honest, he's 7, but he is my grandchild. He said, it seems like a really good philosophy. Really? What do you mean? And he said, well, I think you're supposed to look at life like the bird who sees everything positively. So we flipped along to a section where that bird is caught in a terrible storm and brought into the mud by the rain, and she says, oh, this is the best day of my life. And I said, that seems a little over the top to me. What about you? And he said, I don't know. I like the story. I like the story. I have been working as a professional storyteller for about 18 years now. Yeah. And one of the first things that I realized was when you're the storyteller, you get to tell the story how you see it. And I'm sure that many of you would have heard a fairy tale about the 2 sisters, the good sister, right? Who she unfortunately, when her mother dies and her father remarries, that new stepmother has a daughter that she favors, and she sets the good daughter, the light daughter, all of these tasks, all of this work. And that daughter, in this case we'll call her Elsa, she goes out because she's supposed to spin 3 days worth of thread in one day. And so she decides to go sit by the well to try and spin all of this. And she drops her spindle into the well, and she knows that her stepmother is going to be furious. So she dives into the well. And because this is transubstantiation, because this is a story, she is able to breathe under the water, and she comes to a new land. And on her way up into the land, she sees a fish who's been chained to a wall and can't quite get the worm that's just out of reach. And so she feels pity for him and she gives him the worm. And then she runs into a nanny goat who no one has milked. And so she can't feed her babies who are just on the other side of the fence. And so Elsa, she milks the nanny goat and she gives that to the baby kids. And then she comes to an old woman who is folding laundry. And one of them is a big quilt where feathers are coming down. And her name is Mother Hulda in this story, and she says, "Will you help me fold?" And so the girl, Elsa, she does. She says, "These feathers are the snow that's falling on the land you come from." And so Elsa tries not to shake too many feathers out while she folds. And Mother Hulda says, "Well, you seem to be a hard worker. I'll give you some other impossible tasks." And for each one of those tasks, she calls in one of the animals that she's helped, and they help her. The fish helps her water the field. The nanny goats help her weed the field. And all of that laundry, surprisingly, was able to fertilize the field. And so at the end of these impossible tasks, Mother Hulda says to Elsa, "You've done very well. I will give you a gift to go back to your land." And she taps her on the mouth and sends her home. And when she gets home, there's her horrible, horrible mother and sister. And her stepmother says to her, "Where have you been? We have so much work for you to do." And she opens her mouth to speak and tell the story. And flowers and gold coins drop from her mouth. And the mother says, "This is great news. I will send my daughter, and she will surely do so much better than this waste of time." And she pushes her daughter out, and she goes down the well. And this is where I diverge. When she sees that fish whose worm is just out of reach, she sets that fish free. And the fish swims off and says, "I will teach you my magic anytime you want, for now I have my freedom." And when she sees the nanny goat, she lifts the fence, breaks it down so that the kids can come and join their mother. And that nanny goat says, "I will teach you my magic anytime you want." And by the time she gets to Mother Hulda, she has seen her coming. "You are not like most of the girls who come to my realm. I could teach you my magic if you want." And she does with the animals. She teaches her how to be a sorceress like Mother Hulda, in charge even of the snow. And when she's about to leave, Mother Hulda says to her, "Would you like the gift I gave your sister?" "No. If you gave me gold coins and flowers to fall out of my mouth, my stepmother would never let me go." And they whisper together and decide on something else. And on the trek back to her home, the dark sister, the one we usually see as bad, she is thinking about Elsa. Because Elsa is a sister, is a girl that everyone loved, even her stepsister. And they knew that they loved each other, but that stepmother would have none of it. So they kept it in secret. And on the way home, the dark sister is planning. And when she gets home to her mother and opens her mouth, spiders and snakes fall out, and her mother runs. And she takes her sister. And in town they say that, well, the evil sister disappeared into the woods, and the good sister went off and got married. But I have noticed there's a little house in the middle of the woods where the sisters do magic together. That is my version of dark and light. I have one other short story to share with you very quickly. Death's goddaughter. Oh, death. Oh, death in the morning. Oh, death. Spare me over to another year. There was a young woman who was just getting started in life as a healer. And as she walked down the road, the first person she met was an old woman all dressed in black carrying a scythe. And she sang to her, "Spare me over for another year." But Lady Death, for that's who she was, said, "Come with me." Her feet started to walk of their own volition, and she found she couldn't speak, and she could barely see. And Lady Death said to her, "I can make you the most famous healer in the world if you let me train you." And the girl nodded, and she was taken underground to a deep cave. And when her training was through, she knew everything about healing that was available at that time. And Lady Death said, "You will become famous. And you will have one thing that no other healer has ever had. You will know whether your patient will survive or not. Take this herb, and if you come into a patient and you see that I am standing at their head, you'll know there's nothing you can do. But if I am standing at their feet, you can give them this herb and they will rise from their bed." Everything came to pass the way Lady Death had said it would, until the day when the young healer was called home to her mother and saw Lady Death at her head. She picked up her mother and spun her around so that Lady Death was at her feet and gave her the herb. "You are meddling in things you do not understand." And Lady Death was gone. And it chilled the blood of the healer, and she vowed never to do it again. And yet, she was called to the side of a diplomat who was negotiating in an area of the world where war had been going on for a very long time. And this diplomat was the only hope of peace. And when she saw her godmother, Lady Death, at the head of this diplomat, she thought, world peace is worth more. And she spun that one around as well. And Lady Death just shook her finger and disappeared. And the son of that diplomat saw the healer and fell in love with her and followed her around, supporting her all that he could, until one day she looked up and realized they were in love. And they got married. And less than a month after that, he fell ill. And when she came in to their room, there was her godmother at his head. And she looked right at Lady Death and turned that bed. And her godmother grabbed her by the arm and took her back to the cave where they had trained. And all along the walls were lamps, oil lamps lit. And Death said, "These represent all the millions of lives on earth right now. But look at these 4. 3 were burning brightly, and 1 was just about to gutter. These are the lives that you have meddled in. And this was your lamp, meant to burn as my goddaughter for years to come. Pour the oil back into the lamp." And the healer thought about family. And she thought about world peace. And she thought about love. And she said no. And with that, she fell to Lady Death's feet, dead. And Lady Death tightened her shawl, turned her back, and went about her work.
We are a fellowship supported entirely by the voluntary generosity of our members and friends. We greatly appreciate our faithful pledgers who continue to keep up their monthly contributions, and at Zoom you can do the same virtually. And now we will gratefully accept your generous donations during the musical interlude.
Writers, Tova Janssen's Tales About Moomins, and the character is a Groka, or in the Polish translation, Buka. She's a ghost-like hill-shaped creature with two cold, staring eyes. Whatever she touches or wherever she stands freezes, with all plants and grass dying in the frozen ground below her. A seemingly cold creature, what she truly longs for is friendship and warmth, but she is rejected by everyone and everything, which leaves her stranded in a cold cavern on the top of the lonely mountains. The song is built from multiple piano layers, which makes for a highly energetic mood, but which is not, however, without a cold touch of the restlessness that she feels. And this is by Hani Arani, who's a Polish composer.
now we're going to have our closing hymn, which is number 1003, Where Do We Come From?
Right, just to give everybody a little bit of a roadmap, we are going to be doing this in a round here. So I'm going to be taking the first line, where do we come from, what are we, where are we going? The choir is going to be taking line number 2. If you're on this side of the room, you'll be doing number 3. If you're on this side of the room, you'll be doing number 4. And if that doesn't make sense, pick your favorite line and sing it. Clear as mud? Great. Yes, so sorry, yes, thank you, Karen. It'll be, each line will be 2 times through. So I'll sing the first line twice, then the choir will come and sing it twice. Number 3 will do it twice. Number 4 will do it twice. And then we'll be good. Alrighty. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we
Noble effort. And now our speaker has a benediction for us.
Wanted to say thank you for trying that. That's one of my favorite hymns, so I really love it in a round. Listen to the stories from all over the world, and the stories of the kids in the next room, your neighbor, the one sitting next to you. Think about, are you the bird looking up or the one looking into the mud? What can that man's story tell me? Would I really want death to pass me by? What does mortality mean? All these and more are in stories worth coming to over and over and over again throughout our lives. And maybe ask someone you meet, do you want to hear a story? And see what happens.
Don't sit down. You're going to turn off this. You're going to extinguish the chalice for us. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for being here today. After a few minute break, we are invited to be seated back down for some community discussion, and then meet us across the parking lot in the salon for refreshments and conversation. So we will now have the closing song.